We are back with another video today, and this one's going to be a little bit different, kind of building off the war map explanation video. I'm going to be doing a tier ranking for war attackers. Now again, war attackers only. We're not looking at defense in this. We're not looking at other battle modes, who's good for questing, battlegrounds, any other mode. This is just on war attack. We're going to be going class by class. And just going through who I think the top options are. Maybe this will help you with ranking them and choosing your rank ups if your focus is mainly war, and just kind of to help people out in that way. Now we are going to have 3 tiers, and not every single attack science champ is going to be ranked. And that's who we're starting with. So tier 1 is the critical attackers. Now these are the attackers or champions that are assigned a majority of wars. We'll jump to the science class so we can see. But critical attackers, they're the ones assigned many wars, majority of the wars you see in a season. You want multiple per BG, ideally 3 to 4, I would say, is the sweet spot. And then sometimes these attackers are even signed multiple times, or multiple people are assigned the same attacker in a war. Then we have tier 2. These are the important attackers, assigned multiple per season. Would ideally want 2 per PG, and these are very powerful champs, regularly assigned, but just not as often as the critical attackers. And then tier 3 would be the nice to have. These are the rarely assigned attackers. Maybe you assign 1 to a season. Ideally, you want 1 per BG. And usually the times they're assigned are very unique matchups where there's a specific defender on a specific node. You're like, okay, they make the most sense for it. But those are going to be the 3 tiers. I am going to do a quick honorable mentions just to start. And most of these are honorable mentions because they are 6-star locked. So I'll do the 2, 3, 7 stars to start. The first honorable mention is going to be Spider-Gwen. She is not very tanky at all, and there's a lot of other buff immune champs that are better. She does have easy access to a slow, which could be very beneficial with the new nodes. So that's one of the main reasons I'm actually shouting her out, because of that easy access to slow. But she's just not as good as, the Titanias and those kind of champs that are buff immune. So that's why she's on the honorable mentions. The next champion on honorable mentions is going to be Joe Fixit. He is a decent attacker, and he's usually used when he is tactic. But outside that, he's not used very frequently. He can be pretty good with his special 1 and with all the bleeds on it on, like something like node 49 if there's a specific attacker there. But otherwise, he's just not very frequently used. He does have poison immunity, but besides that, not much else in his kit. And then the last 7-star is going to be Thing. Actually, second to last 7-star is going to be Thing. Thing, a little outdated now. He had he has bleed and shock immunity, which was pretty unique previously. And then he was also very popular when there was the Fury Strike counter, when his protection basically saved him from taking almost any damage. You could just ignore the node. But he's very dated at this stage. I haven't assigned one in 10 plus seasons. It's been a very long time since we assigned a Thing, so that's why he's the other one there. And then we are going to skip over Falcon. He's new. I don't really want to put him anywhere in the ranking until I see him used in war more. And then quick hit on the 6 stars. The 6 stars that are on the honorable mention is Mr. Fantastic. He has some good utility with his pre-fights. He's usually only brought as a pre-fight champion though right now. If he was released as a 7-star, I think his value could go up, but as of right now, that's kind of where he's stuck. The other champion here is Red Guardian. Again, there's lots of other buff immune champs that are just, better or available as a 7-star. So he's kind of just on the sidelines until he's released as a 7-star. We have I-Bomb next. I-Bomb, again, his damage is a little weak. I think if he turned off Inequity, that would also just really help his damage a lot. When he was tactic, he was used a tiny bit a couple seasons ago. But again, he really could use the 7-star to help him get over the hump. And then the final one on the honorable mentions is going to be Anti-Venom. Where's Anti-Venom? Down here. The damage is really bad. He has some nice immunities, and he has a nice easy access to stagger, but his damage is really bad. And then as a 6-star lock, he's just going to be way too slow. So those are the honorable mentions. We'll now start with tier 1, the big top champs. There's only 5 here that I have listed. And again, these are the champs assigned a majority of the wars, I would say. Again, when they're not banned. And these champs do tend to be banned quite frequently. We will start from the top, Titania. And these tiers, there's no specific order to this. I'm just clicking on Titania first because I wrote her down first. That does not mean she's better than anyone else in tier 1. But Titania, very obviously one of the best attackers in war. She is assigned super frequently. She's also very frequently banned, especially when she's tactic. But she is probably the best buff immune champ. I'm sure some people argue that, but she is assigned super frequently. There's tons of rank 3s in my battle group. I'm sure there's tons of rank 3s in every battle group. She's also a great BG attacker, so a lot of people have her ranked. But buff immunity, she has very easy access to stagger, and then she has great damage. She's not a very complicated champ to play. There are more efficient ways to play her where you use her Haymaker to gain power more easily at the start. But the Haymaker is also a great part of her kit that allows her to kind of tank damage and also get very easy intercepts. Next champion we're going to cover, and is my first rank 4 that I was able to choose. That was not from a class gem, and it is Photon. Photon is a great defender and a great attacker. She's neutralize immune when duped, which is going to be very beneficial. I think there's a couple new neutralize nodes on the map, so she'll kind of get around that. She has great power control with her Petrify and heal control because of that as well. She's a miss counter. Her mediums do not miss, and then when she's in pure light form, none of her attacks miss. So she's really good for that. Her bleed resistance, paired with her high energy resistance, make her fantastic for the hazard shift nodes. She can take any of the bleed and cold snap, bleed and shock, bleed and etc. She can even take an incinerate and shock immune or shock debuff node. So just really strong on those nodes. Her energy resistance is just really potent. And then she also has unblockable specials, which is another great part of her kit, and her damage is very, very good. So next, and this is probably the most simple champ, I would say, of the tier 1, and it's Silk. Some people really like her, some people don't. Her damage is super strong, and she's pseudo buff immune, so she's not properly buff immune, but she doesn't generate her own buffs, which is good. I would say buff immunity, full-blown buff immunity is usually better, but she also has very easy access to a slow. Her SIG reduces the defender's regeneration rate. And then I think the most underrated part of her kit is her evade. She has an evade on specials, and it does have a timer if you use it, but you can kind of reset it fairly quickly. But it really can bail you out if you miss time attacks, and then it can be used effectively to evade unblockable specials when you need to as well. She also has a special 3 loop that basically kills all defenders, where you go into the special 3, then you do her combo to get back to a special 2 where you have 3 Furies, and you throw the special 2 and it basically deletes health pools. So that's Silk. Next is going to be Nefaria. Nefaria's fatal flaw is that Unfazed has not been deleted from this game yet. It's terrible. It needs to be deleted. But besides that, he is packed with utility. He's immune to Power Steal and Bleed immune. The bleed immunity does get a little weird when you're not facing science champs, but when you are facing skill champs. Or maybe it's actually non-mystics. Whatever. The bleed immunity gets a little weird, but he also has shock and incinerate resistance, 90%, so very strong for hazard shift nodes. His power and heal control is excellent. He's able to steal power very easily from other attackers, so he's really good against Killmonger, for example. Even though you're playing a bunch of debuffs, he's stealing a bunch of the power, and he's preventing Killmonger from getting the power, so he's really potent there. Just all around a really good champ. He's very tanky and steals a bunch of the healing, so he also heals up a lot. So he's really tanky, really hard to kill, and just really, really strong champion. Was one of my champs I was considering for my first rank 4, although I need to dupe him. And then the final one in this tier 1 is going to be Void. Void is the oldest champ on this list that hasn't been touched, probably. He has really strong heal reversal, really strong power control, and his damage over time is great. He has been one of the best attackers for Path 1 for forever, basically. And he was really good against the Node 37. He can still work in a way as long as you don't let him throw a special. So he's very good champion. There's a lot of very powerful ways to use him where you kind of don't even hit the attacker. And his damage over time is really strong. He also has Incinerate immunity, which is a very nice one to have, I would say. And because you don't need to really hit the defender that much, he's pretty good against those Hazard Shift nodes. And his damage over time is great. Now, working our way to tier 2, and some of these you could argue could be tier 1 champs. And maybe I'm being a little harsh to not have them in tier 1, but this is my list. And you'll disagree with it, I'm sure. But first is going to be Hulk. Hulk is very good champion. He is buff immune with the Silver Surfer synergy. With that synergy, he's one of the top buff immune options by far. Titania's probably a bit better, but Hulk is really good. He also has just massive damage. But yeah, he applies a bunch of debuffs as well if you need that. But outside that, being able to be buff immune and big damage is really good utility in itself. So that's his main thing he has going for him. Next, we're going to have Spider-Man 2099. A champion I probably don't assign as often as I should. And Clown would tell you that for sure. Spider-Man 2099 is extremely versatile. He has great power control with the Withers. When you bring Anti-Venom with him, he has the Wither right away. He is obviously buff immune. The first buff immune champ, I'm pretty sure that was released, which is a very good utility as well. And then because he's able to stack a bunch of debuffs, he has good heal control. He also is really good against the Hazard Shift nodes because he doesn't actually need to hit the defender. He can just hit their block, and that allows them to get around having to hit the defender and worrying about Hazard Shift. It obviously can be a bit risky if the defender goes super aggressive, but if played well, he can take a absurd amount of fights on the map all over the place, basically. And he also has Exhaustion on his heavy, which makes him a great counter for Sasquatch. Next, and I would say, a lot of these could have been moved up potentially. Next, we have Luke Cage, who was an absolute monster for the last tactic. He has great immunity in Bleed. I think Bleed's probably one of the best ones to have. And then he's able to throw special 2s, which apply concussions. Those concussion debuffs, if you have enough of them, and especially against Mystics, can turn off nodes quite a bit. It reduces their ability accuracy. And so if you do that on a Hazard Shift node, he can kind of reduce the chance of debuffs getting through. So he can be really good for some of the Hazard Shift nodes because of that. He also has really strong damage. He applies lots of debuffs, good burst damage on his special 1, and just really strong attacker in general. His damage is very strong. And then he has the Indestructible, which is very good for tanking attacks, tanking a special 3 or anything like that. It makes him really strong for that as well. Next up, we'll do Overseer. I'm not going to lie, I debated putting Overseer in the bottom tier 3. He is a very good champion. He has Nullify and Stagger immunity, which allow him, and Fate Seal, which allow him to get around several of the different nodes, Power Snack and stuff like that. He also is immune to poison. So with those two, that's pretty good. He also has really good damage, especially when he gets in his cosmic mode. And yeah, the special concussions are really nice as well. He can apply a good amount of debuffs. I just think he's a little bit worse than some of the other attackers, Titania and stuff like that. But he's a great option if you start to see a bunch of bans across the science class. And the next 3 are actually going to be 6 stars. Torch is Torch. With Nova Flame, basically no one's immune except for Iceman, I think, is immune to it. I might be wrong there. But he basically has a debuff, passive debuff, that no one's immune to, and he absolutely nukes fights. He would be in tier 1 if you had a 7-star version, but you don't assign him a much this season, but there's a handful of fights every time where you're just like, Human Torch is probably the best, we'll just assign him. So he's great. Obviously, one of the original Mystic killers, and he is still that, even though he's 6-star locked. With the ranks going up for 7 stars, though, he's getting scarier and scarier to use because of his health pool. Next from this list, and Scorpion would have been tier 3 if it wasn't for the changes to the nodes, but he has great immunities for the new nodes. He is Poison, Shock, and Rupture immune rotating. You can only be immune to 2 of those at once, but that is able to let him cover a bunch of the hazard shift nodes. So some of the new nodes, I think there is a Shock and Poison node, and then I believe there is a Rupture and Poison node as well. So he's able to cover 2 of those nodes. And once he's released as a 7-star, he's going to go to tier 1 because he is really strong. He has good heal reversal. He also steals the healing. He has great damage over time with his power stings, although they're not power stings. And he can apply a bunch of different debuffs, which allowed him to take node 49, node 48 pretty easily as well. So really strong champion. Once he's a 7-star, he will go right into tier 1, no question. And another champ who would probably move straight into tier 1 if they had a 7-star is Cassie. She is a really strong champion, great immunities with Poison and Shock. She's buff immune as well, which is another great immunity to have. Paired with an equity, she can take a lot of other hazard shift fights. So, once they have a 7-star first, she'll be back to being used pretty frequently as well. She's a little, I don't want to say finicky. She's a little hard to play though, so I think it takes someone a little bit more skilled to use her, but it's very nice to have several of these in a battle group, especially if you have some that are really competent players that are strong with her. And then we're going to move to tier 3. And tier 3, there's going to be a bunch. I'm going to try and touch on them real quick. But starting at the beginning, Spider-Ham, he has a built-in evade that you can very easily use, and then he has power stings, which very, very few champs are resistant to power sting damage. So he's great for getting around stuff like Safeguard, which there are several more Safeguard nodes on the map. So he may move up depending on how frequently he's used. Next up, we have Red Hulk. Red Hulk would have been in tier 2 if they didn't change the hazard shift nodes. But he's basically Poison and Incinerate immune, which the first section was, and one of the mini fights were. So there's 3 fights on the map that specifically cater to his immunities, and the Poison and Incinerate nodes are all gone. All 3 of them are gone. So his values dropped quite a bit. He still might be assigned for a hazard shift, Incinerate, or Poison node, but yeah, his damage without suicides isn't great either, so he's kind of just fallen down a little bit. And it's unfortunate that they took out all the Poison and Incinerate nodes. Next, we have Sandman. I will say my battle group probably assigned Sandman the most of anyone of our 3 battle groups. He has great immunities. I think he's got Shock, Bleed, and Poison, so 3 immunities, which makes him really good. His damage is on the weaker side for sure, though, and he's just a little bit slow. So he's a good champ, but not the best typically. But I could see him being assigned for a couple hazard shift specific fights. Next, we have Ant-Man. Good immunities, same as Cassie with Shock and Poison, and then buff immunity. His damage is just on the slow side, so you just don't see him assigned that much. He's very reliant on his poison damage as well, which, someone's poison immune, and his damage is really, really bad. So that's just the main reason he's not used very frequently. But, if you get some bans that are targeting science champs, he could be back in the loop. Next, a new champ, or new 7-star, I should say, is She-Hulk. I don't know if I would have had She-Hulk in this list again until they put a bunch of the Mixmaster, and then they put Footloose. So having a slow is very beneficial, and she has super easy access slow on her heavy attack, which makes her really good. She also has poison immunity, which is a nice immunity to have as well. And her damage does ramp fairly quickly. So she's not a bad champ, just not very frequently assigned. We then have Cap Infinity War. He's a very strong champion. He has great utility with the different, classes you can pair him with that give him different abilities that he can apply through parry. He is reliant on synergies with those champions. Not synergies, but having the right chance with them to do whatever task you really want him to do. And then the other drawback of him is you need a parry lot, and then he needs high sig to be, 100% on applying these debuffs. So he has utility. He is occasionally used, but being reliant on the champions you bring with him and then wanting high sig is just a pretty big drawback. On top of needing to parry a lot, which some nodes are trying to punish that. Next up, my rank 3 that I didn't even use last season, Quicksilver. He is a very good champ. He's difficult to play in a way, and he isn't the fastest, but he does have a bunch of utility packed into him. It's just not always accessible right out the gates. He has easy access to a permanent slow, which could make him better for some of those Footloose and Mixed Master nodes. He has damage, that big burst damage, which is also very beneficial. He has a ton of hits, which may be great for some of these safeguard nodes. And then he has access to applying withers, which can help deal with power control. So a lot in his kit, a little bit hard to use. And then he's kind of just, he has a bunch of utility. It's not the easiest to access utility. And for specific fights, usually you can find someone who's just a little bit better. But I like Quicksilver a lot. I took him to rank 3. Hopefully he starts to get used some more. And then Deathless She-Hulk. She has the Fear on her heavy, which is very nice. Which allows her to get around unblockable attacks. And then while her personal fear is active, she cannot miss as well. So those two are really nice utility. She's still got the poison immunity, just like She-Hulk. So she has some good utility. We'll see how much she's used not being tactic. I could see her very easily moving into tier 2, though, depending how much we assign her. Next up, we have, I'll just do Leader first since I clicked on him. Leader, he has good heal reversal, and he has poison immunity. His heal reversal is very potent, and he has them with severe debuffs, which cannot be cleansed. He is going to be specifically useful for node 37, where the the defender cleanses debuffs when they throw special attacks, but leaders will not have his debuffs cleansed. So he could be very good for that specific node. He's very good for a lot of the other Path 1 nodes. On node 10, his, again, severe debuffs are not removed from Masochism. So he does have some good utility there. So we'll see how much he gets assigned, with the map changes. Next up is Spider-Punk. I don't know if I would have had Spider-Punk here if they didn't do the hazard shift changes. Again, different thing there, but he has Rupture immunity. And having Rupture immunity, he is the only one. So that gives him some unique debuff immunity. There's definitely some hazard shift nodes now with Rupture. So that's kind of the main thing here. He can do a decent amount of damage. He's good against Path 5 Destroyer. But yeah, he's a pretty unique champ, and we'll see if he gets used more. But it's not a champ I assign often at all. And then the final champion, and there's 100% bias here, is Mr. Negative. With the defender or the AI changes, he is also terrible against Unfazed. But I really like him. He has great damage over time. He has great power control with his special 2 applying the big petrifies. And then he has degen damage, which basically no one's immune to. I mean, Spider-Ham's kind of immune. And then I'm forgetting the other champs that's kind of immune, but again, not someone you're using him against anyway. And he can convert buffs to his light and dark energy, or light energy then to dark energy, so it makes him pretty good for placebo ones. But until Unphase is deleted or they fix the AI, he's just not the top option, unfortunately. But that does wrap up the video. I'll do a quick picture of the champ. So here's a quick Excel list of them. But yeah, as I noted, tier 1, assign a majority of Royal Wars, occasionally assign multiple per war, ideally 3 to 4 PG. Tier 2, important attackers. multiple per BG, optimal option for many fights. And you want 2 to 3, and then nice to have. These are the ones, rarely assigned, but can be assigned in unique circumstances. So I am helping to do this for all the other classes, and we'll see how those go. But yeah, I'm trying to release hopefully one a day and just get them all lined up so that you guys can see this. Let me know in the comments if you disagree, agree with these, if I completely forgot about your favorite champ. But again, I'll say this is my opinion from my experience in Tier 1 War and from my war planning, and these are the champs I tend to lean towards assigning when I'm doing a plan. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.